I'll be with you in just a moment. I'm just watching the latest Apple iPhone announcement. Yeah, chamfered edges, yeah, best iPhone to date. How much? Hello there, my name is Gary Sims and this is Gary Explains. Now, when we do look at the latest flagship smartphones as they're launched and we see the prices, we can be quite shocked. Now things have reached that $1,000 mark and they're on their way up even higher. And then when we think back to years, let's say like 2014, 2013, 5 years ago, we think, well, hold on, smartphones were never that expensive. What has gone on? Why is the pricing so crazy? Well, today I want to look at the different prices of smartphones and I want to see why are smartphones so expensive today and what does it mean for the future. So let's start by looking at Apple. I will go into Samsung's phones and phones from Google. We'll even take a look at the OnePlus range of phones. But first of all, let's look at the iPhone. Now, the first thing to note is that when the iPhone 5S came out, it was priced off contract at $649. And so when we compare that to, let's say, the iPhone XS and the XS Max, then we're seeing a huge difference in the pricing. But that's not really all of the story. Let's have a look at this graph. What we can actually see is that the $649 price tag for the entry-level iPhone has in fact remained fairly much the same. The iPhone 5S, the iPhone 6, the iPhone 6S and the iPhone 7 were all $649. Now, prices did start to go up when you get to the iPhone 8, and if we consider the iPhone XR to be part of that original iPhone family, the XR will retail for $749 off contract. So basically there's been a $100 difference between the iPhone 5S and the iPhone XR. Now, I don't see that as much of a price increase. In fact, over that 5-year period, just the rate of inflation, if you measure it between 2 and 3% over a 5-year period, will actually account for that $100 price increase. And this is where people are making their mistakes. They're not comparing like with like. You can't compare the iPhone XS Max with the iPhone 5S. They are so completely different products aimed at different people that you can't say, oh wow, look how expensive the iPhone has got. Yes, it carries the name iPhone, but that's basically the only similarity. So next we'll move over to the plus size handsets that Apple tended to release in parallel with their normal size handsets. And as you can see here, the iPhone 6 Plus started at $749, and then that was the same price for the iPhone 6S Plus. Then the price started to go up slightly with the iPhone 7 Plus, and once you got to the iPhone 8 Plus, it retailed for $799. So from the iPhone 6 Plus through to the iPhone 8 Plus, you have a $50 price increase over 4 years. And again, I don't see that as a very high price increase at all. Of course, everything changed once the iPhone X came out. Now, of course, Apple released the iPhone 8 and the iPhone X at the same time, so they were continuing their traditional line of iPhones, and then they also released the iPhone X. Now, the iPhone X is a completely different beast. In fact, it's probably about $200 more just to physically build the iPhone X compared to, let's say, an iPhone 7. So we're talking just about the bill of materials. That's the price of the components that go into the device. That's ignoring R&D, ignoring other manufacturing costs, ignoring all the things that go into actually getting to the point where you can produce that first phone. But the second phone, in terms of its components, even that costs $200 more. So whatever the price is going to be of the iPhone 8, you know that for a start, the iPhone X is going to be at least $200 more. And then of course, you've got to think about profit and advertising and all the other things that go on top of that. And so when you look at all that, the iPhone X costs $1,000, significantly more by $200 than the iPhone 8, but it's a new class of device. And in fact, interestingly, this year now you have the iPhone XS, they've kept the same pricing. It is again $1,000. Of course, the $1,000 is just the starting point. Of course, if you want more internal storage, and that seems to be what costs the money, then you can start adding on more and more dollars as you want more and more internal storage. And so when you look at the lines from the 5S through to the XR, the pricing has very much stayed the same, $100 difference. Then there's a second category, which ones with the bigger screens, the plus size ones, they've stayed within about $50 of their original pricing over the years. But now there's a third category, which is this iPhone 10, and now the 10S and the 10S Max, which are touching and going over that $1,000 mark. So what's actually happening isn't that phones are becoming more expensive, Apple are adding more categories with more phones that are more expensive than their previous ones. As this really is the problem, the categories are actually getting wider. It's not necessarily about pricing. How do you define which is the premium, which is a flagship device nowadays? Is the iPhone 10R a flagship, or is the 10S Max the flagship and the 10R a premium? I mean, this is really where it gets confusing. It used to be kind of, mid-range and maybe premium and then kind of flagship, and it was all very clear. But now there's so many different models, it's not so easy to draw a line to say this is in this category and this is in another category. And so effectively what Apple have done is they've created a new category with a new price range, which is much higher than what we used to see in the traditional iPhone line. But what about the other manufacturers? Well, let's take a quick look at Samsung. Now here I'm going to be looking at just the Galaxy S range. Now I could also look at the Note range, but actually the story is very much similar over there as well. But let's concentrate on the S range. So as you can see from this graph, the Galaxy S4 cost $700 off contract when it was released in 2013. The Galaxy S5 the same. It seemed actually as if the Galaxy S6 slightly lowered that price. Then you have the S7 bumping it up again. The S8 and the S9 are all around this $720, $730 price range for the entry level model. So again, if we look at the S4 all the way through to the S9, we actually see that the pricing has remained very much the same. If you then look at kind of the plus sizes, like we did for Apple, you've got the S6 Edge, the S7 Edge, then the S8 Plus and the S9 Plus, and indeed they have started up lower and they do go up higher, but again there is not a significant growth in pricing. The only caveat to that would be that the S9 Plus did seem to be just a little bit more expensive, not quite following that trend line. But again, overall, each of these products has basically kept a good steady pricing. The normal S range has been remarkable in its pricing. The plus sizes have had a bit of a steeper climb, but again, when you start to consider things like inflation, how much inflation is over the last few years, again 2-3%, these are not radically different prices. Now, as I said earlier, the Note range is again more expensive, but of course the Note range is again another category with its own pricing structure. Now, one possibility for why people have thinking that phones are getting so expensive, other than the fact that these new categories of devices do actually cost more than the previous categories, is also how we've seen devices from like the Nexus line and from OnePlus become steadily more expensive over the last few years. And you kind of think back to 5 years ago and you could get maybe a smartphone killer for $350, and now you're having to pay $500 or even more dollars for the same kind of phone. So let's have a look at those manufacturers. So first of all, let's have a look at the Nexus line. Again, they were sub $400. You had the Nexus 5, the Nexus 5X, and then all that changed when the Pixel came out. It really did bump up the price beyond $600, $650, and then the Pixel and the Pixel 2 basically kept that same pricing. So that's where we saw that leap, but really they were two different types of phones. They were two different ideas, and they had different target markets, and so Google decided to price the Pixel at a different level. But if you look at the Nexus 6, the Nexus 6P as kind of the plus sizes, you'll notice that the Nexus 6 was in fact a very expensive device in its time back in 2014. The 6P was better priced, but then again, when we got to the Pixel and the Pixel XL, the prices did jump up significantly, and that was a marketing decision taken by Google. And the other company that people are interested in, of course, is OnePlus. Way back there in 2014, $350 for the OnePlus One. And then over time, that has gone slightly up, slightly up, slightly up, until now we're looking at $500 or more for the latest OnePlus devices. So from all this, I think we can understand two things. The first is that when you've got companies that want to disrupt the market, like Google did with the Nexus line, like the OnePlus range, then those companies can reduce their profit margins, sell the phones for a cheaper price, change the feature set, and kind of get in under the radar at a significantly lower price. But as those companies start to develop, and as they grow in size and the number of staff they have increase, and the amount of R&D they have to do increase, the amount of advertising they have to do increases, then you can see that those phones over time have become more expensive. And that disruptive force, that kind of attack at the very low price, disappeared, and they kind of start to enter into the mainstream of pricing. However, still cheaper than the flagship devices from Apple and from Samsung. Then the second thing we can learn is that companies like Samsung with their Note range and Apple with the iPhone X range aren't making the phones more expensive per se, they're actually adding in new categories. And these new categories of phones, which are more expensive to make and which have more features, create a whole new price level. So the older phones would be priced like the S range. The S range from the S5 through to the S9 is basically the same price. But when you add in a bigger screen, when you go with the wraparound glass, when you go with all the other things they want to do, then of course you get the S9 Plus, you get the Note range, you get the XS and the XS Max, and all those things. And of course, then you introduce a new price level. Well, my name's Gary Sims, and this is Gary Explains. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up. Also, don't forget to subscribe, and please hit that bell notification icon so that you get notified every time I drop a new video. Okay, that's it. I'll see you in the next one.